With my friend dead, I no longer had anyone to wait for in the morning. I told Marta what had happened, but she did not seem to understand. She muttered something to herself, prayed, and cast her secret enchantment over the household to ward off death, which, she maintained, was lurking close by and trying to enter. Marta became sick. She complained about sharp pain under the ribs, where the heart caged forever flutters. She told me that either God or the devil had sent a disease there to destroy yet another being, and thus put an end to her sojourn on earth. I could not understand why Marta did not discard her skin like the snake and start life from all over again. When I suggested this to her, she grew angry and cursed me for being a blasphemous gypsy bastard, kin to the devil. She said the disease enters a person when you least expect it. It might be sitting behind you in the cart, jump on your shoulders as you bend down to pick up berries in the woods, or crawl out of the water as you cross the river in a boat. Disease sneaks into the body invisibly, cunningly, through the air, water, or by contact with the animal or another person, or even, and here she gave me a wary look, from a pair of black eyes set close to a hawkish nose. Such eyes, known as gypsies or witches' eyes, could bring crippling illness, plague, or death. That is why she forbade me to look directly in her eyes, or even those of the household animals. She ordered me to spit quickly 3 times, and cross myself if I ever accidentally looked into an animal's eyes or her own. She often became enraged when the dough she kneaded for bread turned sour. She blamed me for casting a spell, and told me I would get no bread for 2 days as punishment. Trying to please Marta and not to look into her eyes, I walked about the hut with my eyes closed, stumbled over the furniture, overturning buckets and trampling flower beds outside, knocking against everything like a moth blind by sudden brightness. In the meantime, Marta collected some goose down and scattered it over the burning coals. She blew the resulting smoke all over the room, to the accompaniment of the incantation designed to exorcise the evil spell. She would announce finally that the spell was lifted, and she was right. The next baking always produces savory bread. Marta did not succumb to her sickness and pain. She waged a constant, wily battle against it. When her pain started to bother her, she would take a chunk of raw meat, chop it up finely, and place it into an earthenware jar. Then she would pour water over it that was drawn from a well just before sunrise. The jar was then buried deep into the corner of the hut. This would bring her relief from the aches for a few days, she said, until the meat decomposed. But later, when the pains returned, she went through the whole painstaking procedure once again. Marta never drank any fluids in my presence, and she never smiled. She believed that if she did so, it could give me a chance to count her teeth, and that each tooth so counted would subtract 1 year from her life. It is true that she did not have many teeth, but I realized that at her age, every year was very precious. I, too, tried to drink and eat without showing my teeth, and I practiced looking at my own reflection in the blue-black mirror of the well, smiling at myself with unopened mouth. I was never allowed to pick up any of her lost hairs from the floor. It was well known that even a single lost hair, if it spied by an evil eye, could be the cause of serious throat trouble. In the evenings, Marta sat by the stove, nodding and mumbling prayers. I sat nearby, thinking of my parents. I recalled my former toys, which now probably belonged to another child, my big teddy bear with glass eyes, the airplane with the turning propellers, and the passengers whose faces were visible through the windows, the small, easy moving tank, and the fire engine with its extending ladder. Suddenly, Marta's hut would become warmer as the pictures grew sharper, more real. I could see my mother sitting at the piano. I heard the words of her songs. I recalled my fear before an appendix operation when I was only 4 years old. The glossy hospital floors, the glass mask the doctors placed on my face when preventing me from even counting to 10. But this past of mine was rapidly turning into an illusion, like one of my old nanny's incredible fables. I wondered whether my parents would ever find me again. Did they know that they should never drink or smile in the presence of an evil-eyed people who might count their teeth? I would remember my father's broad, relaxed smile and begin to worry. He showed so many teeth that an evil eye were to count them, he will most certainly die very soon. One morning when I awoke, the hut was cold. The fire in the stove was out, and Marta was still sitting in the middle of the room. Her many skirts tucked up, and her bare feet rested in a bucket full of water. I tried to speak to her, but she did not answer. I tickled her cold, stiff hand, but the knobby fingers did not move. The hand hung down from the arm of the chair, like a wet linen from a clothesline on a still day. When I lifted her head, her watery eyes seemed to be staring up at me. I had seen such eyes only once before, when the stream threw up the bodies of dead fish. Marta, I concluded, was waiting for a change of skin, and like the snake, she could not be disturbed at such a time. Though uncertain what to do, I tried to be patient. It was late fall. The wind was crackling. The brittle twigs, it tore off the last of the wrinkled leaves, tossed them into the sky. Hens perched owlishly in their roost, sleepily and depressed, opening with their distaste one eye at a time. It was cold, and I did not know how to kindle a fire. All my efforts to talk to Martha failed to elicit any response. She sat there motionless, staring fixedly at something I could not see. I went back to sleep, having nothing else to do, confident that I would wake up and would be scurrying around the kitchen, humming her mournful psalms. But when I awoke the evening, she was still soaking her feet. I was hungry and frightened of the darkness. I decided to light the oil lamp. I began to search for the matches Marta kept safely hidden. I carefully took the lamp off the shelf, but it slipped in my hands and spilled some kerosene on the floor. The matches refused to light. When one finally flared up, it broke off and fell to the floor into a pool of kerosene. At first the flame timidly stopped there, casting off a puff of blue smoke. Then it boldly leapt into the middle of the room. It was no longer dark, and I could plainly see Marta. She didn't appear to notice what was happening. She didn't seem to mind the flames, which had by then moved to the wall and up the legs of her wicker chair. It was not cold any more either. The flames were now close to the bucket in which Marta was soaking her feet. She must have felt the heat, but she didn't move. I admired her endurance. After having sat there all night and all day, she still did not stir. It became very hot in the room. Flames climbed up the wall like clinging vines. They flapped and crackled like dried pods underfoot, especially by the window, where a meager draft managed to penetrate. I stood by the door, ready to run, still waiting for Marta to move. but she sat stiffly, as though unaware of anything. The flames started to lick her dangling hands, and as might an affectionate dog. They now left purple marks on her hands and climbed higher towards her matted hair. The flame sparked like a Christmas tree and burst into a high blaze, forming a peaked hat of fire on Marta's head. Marta became a torch. Flames encircled her tenderly from all sides, and the water of the bucket hissed when some shreds of her ragged rabbit fur jacket fell into it. I could see under the flame patches of her wrinkled, sagging skin and whitish spots of her bony arms. I called to her the last time I ran outside into the yard. The hens were cackling desperately and beating their wings to the coop adjoining the house. The usually placid cow was mooing and butting the barn door with his head. I decided not to wait for Marta's permission and set about freeing the hens on my own. They rushed out hysterically and tried to take flight on desperate beating wings. The cow succeeded in breaking down the barn door. She took up an observation point at a safe distance from the fire, pensively chewing her cud. By now, on the inside of the hut was a furnace. Flames jumped through the windows and through the holes, the thatched roof catching fire from below, the smoking ominously. I marveled at Marta. Was she really so indifferent to all this? Had her charms and her incantations granted her immunity against a fire that turned everything else about her into ashes? She still had to come out. I had to move that far end of the yard. The heat was becoming unbearable. The chicken coop and the barn were now on fire too. A number of rats, frightened by the heat, scurried wildly across the yard. The yellow eyes of a cat, reflected on the flames, gazed from the dark edges of the field. Marta failed to appear, though. I was still convinced that she could emerge unscathed. But when one of the walls collapsed, engulfing the charred interior of the hut, I began to doubt that I would ever see her again. In the clouds of smoke rising in the sky, I thought I detected a strange oblong shape. What is it? Could it be Marta's soul making an escape for heaven? Or was it Marta herself, revived by the fire, relieved of her own crusty skin, leaving this earth on a fiery broomstick, like the witch in the story my mother told me? Still staring at the spectacle of the sparks and flames, I was jolted out of my reverie by the sound of men's voices and barking dogs. The farmers were coming. Marta always warned me that about the village people. She said if they ever caught me alone, they would drown me like a mangy kitten or kill me with an axe. I started running as soon as the first human figures appeared within the circle of light. They did not see me. I ran madly, hitting invisible tree stumps and thorny bushes. I finally fell into the ravine. I heard the distant voices of the people and the crash of the falling balls, and then I fell asleep. I woke up at dawn, half frozen. A shroud of mist hung between the edges of the ravine like a spider's web. I scrambled back to the top of the hill. Wisps of smoke and occasional flame rose over the pile of charred woods and ashes where Marta's hut had stood. Everything around me was silent. I believed that now I would meet my parents in the ravine. I believed that, even far away, they must know all that had happened to me. Wasn't I their child? What were parents for if not to be with their children in times of danger? Just in case they should be coming near, I called out to them, but no one answered. I was weak and cold and hungry. I had no idea what to do or where to go. My parents were still not there. I trembled and vomited. I had to find people. I had to go to the village. I limped on my bruised feet and legs, cautiously making my way over the yellowing autumn grass. towards the distant village.